My name's Garry. I'm one of the pastors here. Really glad that you decided to join us this morning. As Russ mentioned, we're coming to you live from the Avalon Cinemas at Woodgrove Mall as we get ready to invite you back to in-person services beginning next week. It's going to be awesome. I know the staff and the leadership, we're all excited to see you as we gather together for the first time in over 18 months. And like the band sang, we are going to make this place your home. So we're really looking forward to that. Now, the thing is, you might not be comfortable with coming back yet, and that's okay. Or maybe you're totally comfortable with coming back, but it's like, I can't. I live in another part of the province. I just physically can't be there. Well, if that describes you, I just want you to know that, we've got you covered. We are completely committed to continue live streaming. We're going to have the chat with hosts on it and the whole bit. You really won't notice much of a difference other than, what's behind us. So I just wanted you to know that. Now, to keep you up to date, I want you to keep an eye out for an email that's going to be coming to your inbox this week. And it's going to explain everything that you need to know about what you can expect next Sunday when you walk through the doors here. Things like masks or no masks, what's going on with kids, and all the other things that happen here on a Sunday morning. So keep an eye out for that. Now, if you're not getting emails from us, you would know we send one out every Saturday evening. It's got the link to the live stream on it. People like it because it's super easy. We've also sent emails through this whole journey we've been on the last year and a half on different health updates and what's going on, where we're meeting and all that kind of thing. And if you haven't been receiving those, it means one of two things. One, you don't read your email, or two, you're not on our email list. But here's the thing, it's super easy to get on our email list. Go to themeetingplace.org, scroll to the bottom of the page, and on the right-hand side, you'll see a button that says, Join our email list. Click on that, fill out the pertinent information, boom, you're in, and you'll start getting the emails. Now, just so you know, we will not spam you. We won't fill your inbox with a bunch of stuff that isn't important. I promise. Okay? So go ahead and do that if you're not getting your emails from us. Now, you may be sitting there watching going, well, hang on a second. Define spam. Because what's spam to you and what's spam to me might be different and vice versa, right? And you'd be totally right. For example, we might send out an email talking about a potluck we're going to be having. And you get the email and you read it and you go, potluck, schmotluck, I can't stand potlucks. They're disgusting. I'm not going. But for us, it's important because it's about community and everything. But for you, we've just spammed you. Well, we promise we won't do that. See, it all comes down to perspective. From our perspective, it was important. From yours, it wasn't. And that's okay. But it's all a matter of perspective, and perspective matters. Here's what I mean. Maybe right now you're in high school or university, and you're playing on a sports team. Or maybe, if you're a little older, you can think back, and I remember, being on volleyball team or basketball team, hockey, whatever it happens to be. And you make it to the big game, the provincial championship or the nationals or whatever it happens to be, and you make it, your team makes it, and then you lose. You lose the big game. Now, more than likely, you've probably experienced this if you've been there. Somebody comes up to you and you say, you know what? You guys gave it all you got. It was a good, valiant try. Way to go. But you know what? Don't be downcast. It's only a game. It's just a game. Now, they're just trying to be helpful, right? They're trying to just ease the discomfort and the disappointment that you're feeling, right? And here's the thing, in the grand scheme of things, they're right. It is just a game. 30 years from now, it's not going to make a huge difference in your life. It's just going to be a distant memory that you have. But here's the thing. In that moment, when you're walking off the field, walking off the court, and you've just lost, it's much more than just a game. I mean, for the last, who knows how long, you've invested time. You've got up early, you've gone to practice, you've sweated, maybe even bled day after day for months to get ready for that big game, and then you lose. For you, from your perspective, in that moment, it's more than just a game. Maybe for you, the sports analogy doesn't work. Maybe for you, you're all about academics. Do you remember report card day? I don't know if they still have them. Depending on your perspective, it was either the best day of the year or one of the worst, depending on your grades. Well, I remember this one year, one of my buddies, his name was Edgar Lau. And this guy was like a walking brain. I think his body was like 90% brain, and then the rest was just legs and arms to get him around. He was so smart, he'd get 105% on a test. Because not only did he get all the questions right, he got all the bonus questions right. I remember this one report card day. I think we were going from grade 5 to 6. And my buddies and I were out in the playground kind of hanging around. And out comes Edgar. And he's walking out and he's got his head down. His shoulders are slouched. He's dragging his feet. He just looks totally dejected. And so we see this and we all run over. Hey, man, what's up? What's up? And he just kind of hands us his report card. And so I grab it and I'm looking at it, and it's like English, A. Math, A. Language arts, A. And I'm thinking, dude, well, like, what's the problem here? And then I saw it. Phys ed, B. He had one B. And he was just devastated. So, of course, we're all like, dude, it's going to be okay, man. It's like one B. What's the big deal? Especially from, well, I'll speak for me personally, my perspective. I had one B too. It was the only B I had, and the rest were C's and D's. So, I mean, from my perspective, he had a stellar report card. But from his perspective, in that moment, that B meant everything to him. It's a matter of perspective, and perspective matters. Especially when we apply this perspective matters concept to the big things in life. You know, the things that shake your life to the core, that grab you and wake you up, keep you up at night. They're life-changing, life-altering. Maybe for you, you're tuning in this morning and you're going through or have gone through a relational breakup. It's a relationship that you've been in for decades. It was one that was sealed with a ring and a kiss and vows. Till death do you part, and now he's gone or she's gone. And someone comes up to you and says, you know what? It's going to be okay. There's other fish in the sea. Sure, that might be true, but that's not helpful right now. I mean, yeah, it might be true that there may be somebody out there that I might cross paths with, that we share some interests, and a meaningful relationship gets kindled. Yeah, I understand that 15 or 20 years from now, I'm not going to be sitting on my couch eating a box of chocolates watching the Hallmark Channel. But right now, in this moment, from my perspective, life hurts. This is terrible, and I don't want to be here. Maybe for you, it's financial. You're working hard. You are doing your utmost best to make ends meet. But at the end of the month, there's always more month than money. And the past due and final notice messages are piling up, and you don't know what to do. And someone comes along and says, you know what? It's going to be okay. It's just money. Yeah, it's just money. But you know what? It's keeping me up at night. It's a matter of perspective. Perspective matters. And so just take a few seconds to think about what it is for you. What is it that's keeping you up, that grabs your attention, that from your perspective is really important to you, but to others it doesn't seem as important? For me, it's feelings of inadequacy and confidence. I mean, there are mornings when I wake up and the thought of me leading this church just kind of weighs in on me. And I look in the mirror and I think, who am I to be pastoring this church? Like, really? Now, I love my job. I love the fact that I get to to serve and journey with you guys. Don't get me wrong, but I still struggle with feelings of inadequacy, not being good enough, not being the right person. And here's the thing, if I'm not careful with what I do what we all tend to do. I microscope my issue. I microscope it. And here's what I mean by that. A microscope is designed to magnify small things and make them look bigger than they actually are. In a way, it blows things out of proportion. And when it comes to the things that we face in life, whatever that happens to be for us, it's really easy to do, isn't it? To just get so focused in on what you're dealing with that that's all you can see. We zoom in and we magnify. And quickly, the thing that we're dealing with becomes the only thing we can see. We can't see around it, over it, through it. We blow it out of proportion by microscoping in on the issue, and we turn it into an even more imposing, menacing giant of a problem, which in the end does us no good, because these problems that we face, they're big enough to begin with. And that's why I want you to hear what I'm going to say next. Don't miss this. I am not standing here in any way, shape, or form diminishing or minimizing whatever it is you're facing. Because whatever it is you're up against, the reality is if it's big for you, it's big for you. It doesn't matter what my or someone else's perspective is on it. The reality is your reality. And so I'm not standing here saying, you know what, you just need to suck it up and get over it. Because I know what it's like. What I'm saying is that this stuff that we face, we were never designed to deal with on our own from the beginning. But oftentimes, when we microscope our lives, isn't that how we feel? Alone, isolated, surrounded with seemingly no way out, nowhere to go, and no sign of help. It's a matter of perspective, and perspective matters. There's a story in the Bible. It's in the Old Testament, and it's in a book called 2 Kings. And I love the originality of how they labeled all these books and letters and stuff that make up the Bible. This is called 2 Kings because, well, there's two books called Kings, 1 Kings and 2 Kings. And the books recount the rise and fall of all the kings in Israel's history, hence the name Kings. Pretty original, right? But anyway, this story that we're going to look at today, it took place when the king of Syria, a man named Ben-Hadad, was at war with Israel. These two nations didn't like each other, and this guy, Ben-Hadad, this king, was determined to defeat Israel once and for all. Just get them, they're a thorn in his side, just get rid of them. And so he would do what all kings do. He would gather his generals and his commanders and his officers together in the war room, and they would make plans, war plans, attack plans. And what he would do is he would gather all the intel that people were collecting, all his officers, as they went out and they had the ear to the street, and he would find out where Israel was weakest. And then he'd gather his troops and he'd say, okay, go attack there, infiltrate there. And so they'd head off and they'd show up. And guess what? The Israeli army was standing there ready to fight. And this kept happening over and over and over again. And he's like, what is going on? We've got to have a mole in amongst us. If you think reading the Bible's boring, man, it's all through this. It's got stories like this. But so check out what happens. It says the king of Syria was furious when he found out what was happening, no doubt. And he called in his officers and he asked, which one of you has been telling the king of Israel our plans? Now imagine being in that room. It would have been complete silence. It's not like somebody's, oh, it was me, sorry. Is that okay? I didn't mean to. No, everyone's like, make yourself look small and he won't see you, right? But then it says, none of us, your majesty. Somebody voices, it wasn't us. It's none of us. It's an Israelite named Elisha. He's a prophet, so he can tell his king everything, even what you say in your own room. Now, a prophet was like a spokesperson for God. God would choose certain people that he would work through to let other people know what to do, what not to do. And oftentimes these prophets, he would give them the power to pull off miracles and stuff like that. And this was one of the things. He would give Elisha this inside information. And so Israel could be ready for any attack. Now, if that doesn't sound like it's out of a James Bond movie or Tom Clancy novel, I don't know what does. I mean, it's full of international intrigue, there's spies, everything. And so the king says, find out where he is, and I'll send soldiers to bring him here. And they learned that Elisha was in the town of Dothan and reported it to the king, and he ordered his best troops to go there with horses and chariots. And they marched out during the night and surrounded the town. Now, you may be tuning in this morning going, okay, this is cool, but what does this have to do with anything that we've been talking about today? Well, it sets us up for what happens next. Check this out. When Elisha's servant got up the next morning, he saw that the Syrian troops had the town surrounded. Sound familiar? In essence, this guy was doing what we tend to do when we're faced with an issue. He microscoped it. He magnified it. The only thing he could see was the position they were in. We're surrounded by horses, chariots, men, spears, arrows. We're doomed. There's no way out of this. From his perspective, things looked hopeless. And rightly so. I mean, this army was real. And he verbalizes how he's feeling by asking this question. He says to Elisha, "Sir, what are we going to do? What are you going to do about this?" And listen to how Elisha responds. He says, "Don't be afraid." In other words, don't worry. It's going to be okay. It's just an army. Sound familiar? It's just a game. It's just a bee. There's other fish in the sea. It's just money. It's a matter of perspective, and perspective matters. And sometimes the best perspective is a new one. "Don't be afraid," Elisha answered. And then he says this, "There are more troops on our side than on theirs." It doesn't say in the story, but I can't help but think, and again, it doesn't say this, but I don't think it's much of a stretch to think that Elisha's friend might have been thinking to himself, or maybe even verbalized it. He's like, "What are you talking about? We have more troops than them. We don't have more troops. In fact, we don't have any troops. Have you looked around? There's nobody there but the Syrian army." And I love what Elisha does next. It says, Elisha prayed. And he said, "Lord, please help him to see." Help him to see. Give him a new perspective. And the Lord let the servant see that the hill was covered with fiery horses and flaming chariots all around Elisha. God had an invisible army surrounding the Syrian army. It was much more powerful, yet this other guy couldn't see it. And oftentimes that's what we do. Get so fixated on what's in front of us, we can't see it. It's a matter of perspective, and perspective matters. As a prophet, Elisha had seen God do some incredible things. And he had been in situations that seemed overwhelming, much like this one, with no way out, no way around it, no way to fix it. And yet God kept showing up time after time after time. And through his experiences with God, he just knew that God could be trusted, that he was going to be faithful, that it was going to be okay. God's here. You see, he had a completely different perspective. You can put it this way. In essence, what Elisha did was, instead of microscoping the problem, he telescoped God. He telescoped God. And here's what I mean by that. Although a microscope and a telescope are similar in that they magnify things, they do it in a different way. Like we heard at the beginning of this talk, a microscope takes something small and makes it look bigger than it really is. A telescope, however, takes something that is massive but appears small to us and makes it look more like it actually is. Right now, if you get up early enough in the morning before the sun comes up, and if you know where to look, you can see Jupiter with the naked eye. It's showing up right now over Mount Benson. And even though it's the largest planet in our solar system, it's like 11 times bigger than the Earth. Someone said if you take a nickel, and that's Earth, Jupiter would be the size of a basketball. It's quite a bit bigger. But to the naked eye, when you look at it with the naked eye, it's just a white dot in the sky. But if you telescope it, wow. I mean, what an incredible picture. Hardly the white dot that it appears to be. Instead of this nondescript pinpoint of light, you get to see the colors and the shapes and the contours all formed by the gases that this planet is made up of. When you telescope it, you get a sense of the immensity, the size of this planet. And if you've ever looked through a telescope at night and you zoom in on a planet, whether it be the moon or some other planet, you know the feel, it's almost dizzying. Like you look and it's like you're being pulled into the telescope. It's so awe-inspiring. It leaves you in utter amazement. And the same is true when we telescope God. When we take time to focus in on him, we'll begin to see how awesome he is, how big he is. And when we see how big he is, the thing that we're facing all of a sudden pales in comparison. And again, I'm not saying that we just quit looking through the microscope and look through the telescope. What I'm saying is when you're looking through this, don't forget to step back and hold who God is in perspective of what your problem is. It just changes your perspective. It will shift. But often we don't even do that because we're so focused and microscoped on our problem that we can't see past it to even begin looking for him. And if we do, take our eyes up enough to kind of spot God, he just seems like he's far off and he's distant, like Jupiter. He's just this little dot. And he's uncaring, disinterested in my life and what's going on. And so I better just roll up my sleeves and get to work and get through this thing. But sometimes, if we take the time to telescope him, it's then that we'll begin to see that he's not distant. He's not uncaring. He's not disinterested. He's the exact opposite. And so the question you might be asking, and it's a really good question, is, well, how do I even do that? How do I telescope God in a practical way? And again, great question. And the easiest way, the place to start, is just by reading about him. Just pick up the Bible. The Bible is chock full of stories of people who have experienced God, and they wrote down their thoughts. They wrote down their experiences to encourage us reading them thousands of years later. It's the same God. Start in the Psalms. Fantastic songs and laments talking about life, like raw and real. Read the biographies of Jesus, because Jesus, as we believe around here, was God incarnate, God with flesh on. And so if you want to know what God was like, look to Jesus. So read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. When we magnify who he is and what he's like, our perspective begins to shift. Everything gets right-sized. Instead of a distant, uncaring, judgmental God, we learn that God is actually kind. He's gentle, he's compassionate, he's caring, and he's loving. Listen to these words from this rough, gruff fisherman named Peter that we've talked about a lot around here. He says this: cast all your anxiety, all your cares, all your worries, all your concerns, cast all of those on him. Why? Because he cares for you. And Peter would know. Listen to this from a psalmist. But you, O Lord, are a God of compassion and mercy, slow to get angry and filled with unfailing love and faithfulness. Does that sound like a distant, uncaring God? Man, when we take the time to just really dig in and see who God is, we'll discover what people have been discovering all through history. That when things are coming at you, we can say this: God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, when we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. In other words, when life is coming apart at the seams, we can still take refuge and find strength in God, and we don't have to fear. Again, it's simple, but it's not easy. But that's why we're here. That's why we gather together to encourage and walk with one another through this stuff. And so the best way to telescope God is to lift your eyes up. I lift my eyes up to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, who made the heaven and the earth, which includes you and me. You see, it's all a matter of perspective. And perspective matters. And so the question you need to ask is, what is your current perspective? I'm really glad I get to be on this journey with you. I'm glad that you decided to spend some of your BC Day long weekend tuned in. But I just want you to know that if you want to connect, if something has come up for you, if you've got that thing that you're microscoped on, and you just need to talk with someone about it, we've got an awesome team online. Russ mentioned it. We've got Guy and Dion, our hosts, online hosts. If you want to talk with them, have them pray for you, whatever it happens to be, just simply click on request prayer button and you'll be put in touch with them. But maybe you're not on the chat room, or that's not your thing. That's okay. Maybe you want to just send us an email, and you can do that too. Just send it to prayer@themeetingplace.org. Let us know how we can pray for you, and you'll have a team of people praying for you. And if you want us to get a hold of you, just let us know how we can do that. But take advantage of that. We're not designed to do this life alone. But oftentimes when we're microscoped and focused on that thing, that's exactly how we feel. So let's not quit microscoping, but telescope God and just see how our perspective changes. Once again, thanks for tuning in. Glad to be on this journey with you, and I can't wait to see you next week. I invite you to pray with me. God, man, when life is coming at us, when we've got an issue that we need to deal with, whether it's relational, whether it's physical, financial, whatever it happens to be, it can be so easy to become myopic and just, that's all we see. And almost to the detriment that we can't even see you in it anymore. But as we heard through this story, you're there. Sometimes we just don't see you because we're not looking for you. So I just pray that you'd work in each of our lives, that, man, we could just take a breath and begin to just focus in on you, telescope you in. Remind ourselves of all the promises that you make to us, that you will always be there, that you love us beyond anything we could ever begin to imagine, and that you have a life for us, an abundant life that you want us to step into and live. So again, we just thank you. Be with all of us as we navigate these weird times we're in. And I'm sure we've all got our things that we're microscoping right now. Just help us to step back and see things in their proper perspective. Thank you for loving us, and we pray all of this in your beautiful, awesome name. Amen.